Welcome to the 38th episode of the Decentralized Opportunity Podcast. I'm your host, Tanner Lytle, here with your other host,
Wyatt Carson. Oh man, 38. I think we said we'd do something special for our 50th. We're getting close.
Well, every episode's special.
Oh, well, it's because you're with me. No, I'm just kidding. No, so as we often do, we are chatting and discussing about upcoming topics as we continue to book more guests here in the near future. Very exciting in the near future. We talked about it in our last episode, our first live in studio interview coming up soon. That's going to be really exciting. But today we're going to continue a small topic we kind of hit on last week. And that topic was gratitude. So Tanner, I talked about it, but you live gratitude. So what does gratitude mean to you?
Well, I didn't actually think of that definition for it, but yeah, something that each week that I do is I have a journal. So I write whatever's on my mind, and that has been extremely therapeutic. Basically anything that I'm just mulling over, or you're thinking constantly in the shower, if you can just externalize that in some way, it helps. And with part of that is just making sure I have an understanding of the perspective of the things that I do have, rather than just focusing on the things that I don't, things that are going wrong, or things that I wish I could change. It's just being appreciation of the stuff that I do have going for me, the things that are set in my life, and then just kind of reflecting on that. So I guess that's kind of what I would think of gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And I touch on certain things. So my health is one of those. And that's one of the things I find that I've probably taken for granted so much in my life. So I would just like to be gracious and have gratitude around the fact that I can do the walks that I do, and I can exercise the well I do. I'm lighter than I was before. I'm healthier than I was before. And I have youth on my side still and lots of time ahead of me, and all those things that I'm sure old but rich people would trade all their wealth away in a second for. So just reflecting on that, family, community, work, just all those different pieces. I try to just touch on each day just to realign myself. I don't know. How about yourself?
Yeah, so I don't keep a journal. We've talked about it before, and I want to, but I'm not disciplined enough. But what I did find was that it was really easy for me to slip into kind of a negative mindset in anything. You and I've talked lots about social media and the news, and everything's just negative now. And it's very easy to fall into that trap. I fall into it still all the time. But what I found is the more I kind of sunk into that negativity and I watched more news or I read it or whatever, the more I started to just kind of get angry and grumpy and bitter. And I had to kind of take a step back and figure out what my problem was. We have this, as I'm sure lots of relationships do, we have this kind of unwritten rule in the house where when I'm being kind of a jerk, my wife will try to politely inform me. And if I don't get the message, she'll more forcefully, inform me. And sooner or later, we've been together long enough where she can give me a look and I'll be like, oh, I need to go clean the garage again or whatever the situation may require. But so I thought about it. And first off, it started to purge social media. I don't read the news, unless it's something that really catches my eye. And usually not about politics anymore. But something that I found was really helpful for me was to kind of just stop. And whatever I was doing, whether I was at work or before I go to bed or in the morning when I have some peace and quiet before everyone wakes up, I started to think about how awesome it was to have the things and the people I have in my life. And it made me feel better. And I did this for a couple of days before I was like, oh, that's gratitude. Oh, I get it. So I don't write it down. I probably should, but I've made a really conscious effort. At least once a day, I have kind of a conversation with myself in my head. And I say, hey, something along the lines of, hey, remember where you were 15 years ago, 20 years ago? Look at you now, that sort of thing. And it really perks me up.
Yeah, it's crazy how our mindset can affect pretty much everything in our life. I think about, I don't know, one of the struggles that I have is I can get really frustrated with stuff, especially if it's outside of my control. And I've been talking to quite a few people about this recently, where I try not to slip into these negative loops, going through the same motions, fixating on the same things, especially when they're outside of my control, but just focus on the things that I can. And again, have gratitude for the things that I do have, knowing from where I came from. And it's a little bit of that gap in the gain thing where you're always trying to aspire to do more and do all this other stuff, but it can often lead you down the wrong path of just poor mental health, lots of extra stress. It can even really affect your physical health. So I find that when I fall into these loops, then I'm not eating as well, which then spirals me into not feeling as good, which means I don't exercise as much. I don't go for my walks. I feel lethargic. I had a bad day recently where all I wanted to do was just lie in bed and do nothing. But all of that compounds, right? So if you have a positive mind space, you're going to be more apt to actually go out, get things, influence others, and make things for yourself. And there's always something to be said about your outlook. If you project something out into the universe, it always seems to come true. And I've actually wrote about this in my journal, where it's not a matter of like the universe is actually reciprocating stuff, but it's these micro actions that you're constantly doing and you're constantly portraying that yield rewards and dividends over time. And if you're constantly negative, and this is the struggle that I'm wanting to make sure that I put in line, if you're constantly negative, then that reflects bad on you with other people, because they may genuinely care about you, they may want to help you, but it's always a somewhat negative experience when they deal with you. And so they're just going to be less apt to want to deal with you, or they have to kind of brace themselves or do things. But if you can stop looking so inwardly, but focus a little more outwardly on what you can do, and then that's again part of a positive mindset of just feeling like you're capable and you're the one of doing it, and then generating all this action, you actually make a positive influence, and that just compounds over time. So rather than just slipping backwards into a harder area, you are constantly moving forward just from how you think about things. And it's pretty wild because you yourself may feel no different. You may be following the exact same motions or routines, or at least you think you are. But the way you approach everything will actually dramatically affect not just the output that you produce, but the lines of your life that you will take moving forward, right?
That was poetic.
Thank you.
But no, but we're not sitting here saying, hey, if you're in a bad mood or you're feeling grumpy, just think positive. We understand it's not that easy. But it's amazing how you can go down a spiral really fast. Everyone has bad days. Everyone gets grumpy, and that's okay. What turns that situation into a worse situation is when you just accept your fate and, oh, it's a crappy day and tomorrow's going to be crappy too. And I've got XYZ coming up and that's stressful and blah, 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 blah. And it's just a spiral down into this kind of pit of despair. And it's really hard to get yourself out of that, which is really why I started working on this gratitude thing. Like I said, just by myself in private, in my head. It's really hard to spend 2 or 3 minutes thinking about all the good things in your life and not feel a little better afterwards. Stress from work or family or whatever the situation may be, money, common stress, things like that. They exist. They'll always be there. And you're going to have those stressors in the future. But right now, today, if you can just take a few minutes and be a little positive, it's amazing how much it's helped me. It sounds a little altruistic. I understand bad days happen, but it's about shifting. You're not going to make major changes. You just have to kind of make those tiny movements, and you might be surprised to see how your mood changes.
Yeah, well, there's a difference between being grumpy and then being pathologically negative.
Yeah, very much so.
And you may not be severely negative. There's definitely people in your life that are just always skewed to the negative, or they read way too much political stuff. They deal with all this stuff and they just live on the fringes of the fires that are going on every day. And that's a different level than even what we're talking about here. But if you're just constantly finger just slightly pressed towards the negative side, again, it's incredible how that spirals and holds you back. And that's what I've been really focusing on lately, and really trying to do is put my, not just my finger on the other side of the scale, but really press my hand on it, because again, the rewards are exponential. And ultimately, again, no one wants to deal with somebody who is just pathologically negative. And you almost have to put on a facade, or going back to some of the concepts of stoicism that you talked about previously, even if you're feeling it internally at first, you have to kind of project, you can't project that out into the world because of the negative implications that can happen from it. But what I really like about gratitude is it's not just like a mask that you're wearing, but it is something that you feel genuinely and deeply within you that can then radiate externally. And so you're not feeling disingenuine with it, but you truly have it. And it's just hard to fall into those cycles. And so I guess I would love to know what some of your practices have been, that where you've found some success, and perhaps where are some areas that you're struggling with when it comes to, focusing on what you do have, the positive on things, the glass half full situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think my practice of trying to mentally do this stemmed from my job. And we've talked about it. I really like my job, but my job can be really stressful at times. And there will be weeks when it's just a normal work week, no big deal. There'll be another week when it's insane hours and up all night doing crazy stuff, and it can be kind of on both edges of the scales. But what I found is in a lot of my projects, I think we talked about this too, that valley of despair I've already talked about. When I think something's just going wrong, and I swear, oh, this is it. This is the time I get in trouble. This is the time the client hates me. I found that, what, I've been doing this for a while. Now I've done lots of projects. I've worked with lots of companies, and no one's fired me yet. Well, that's a different story, but as a consultant, so I had to kind of step back and be like, okay, what's your problem here? You keep going this, what's the word I'm looking for? Like extreme. I can't think of the word. I had it for a second, but I'm always finding myself on this verge of super stressed out, gonna get fired. Oh, and then, it tunnels down into, or spirals down into other things, imitation, or man,
Imposter syndrome.
imposter syndrome. I'm having a hard time with words today, Tanner. I found that it just explodes if I let it happen too much. So what I started doing is I had to sit back, like, okay, whoa, chill. Okay. So let's see, 15 years ago, 15 years ago, I was working at, a prison. I was working at a prison 15 years ago. Not a fan of that job. Wasn't my kind of atmosphere. I couldn't imagine why, right? And then, I've had other bad jobs before, and I just stop and like, hold on, Wyatt. You've built a career over a decade, more than a decade now. You went to school, you did all these things. You're in a company that respects you. And these companies that hire you, they respect you and they want your services. And I just had to kind of flip the script on myself, and it started making me feel a lot better. For example, I'm in a project right now, and I'm starting to see that valley coming. I'm starting to see those problems, and I'm just not making the kind of movement I want. But this time around, I'm really trying to stop myself and say, calm down. You're here. You need to be here. This is your gap. Don't worry about how you're going to get there necessarily. Just take it step by step, and remember that, I'm a competent human being, and they chose me to do this job for a reason. And that's been really helpful. And that spiraled in a good way into, the house I live in, my children, my fat, lazy cat, who I usually make fun of, who's just laying right next to me right now, but is kind of my work buddy. And it turned into a positive spiral of talking in my head about all these wonderful things that I have in my life that old Wyatt used to really want. And you already hit on it. I'm a huge Stoicism fan. I have one more Stoicism quote that's relevant to today's discussion. It's by Epicurus, and I had to write it down so I didn't ruin it. It says, "Do not spoil what you have by desiring what you have not. Remember that what you now have was once among the things you only hoped for." And I love this quote because, you know, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, is old me didn't have anything I have today. And I owe it to hard work and sometimes positivity.
I think imposter syndrome is one of those symptoms, I guess, that has been affecting me.
Mm-hmm.
Your story there just really resonates pretty hard. There's a lot of lines that kind of came up into my head of what to kind of that came from that. But I find this usually, like we said, imposter syndrome, certain amounts of anxiety, certain amounts of just things that happen once you start like shifting into the darkness of the negativity with it. It comes back down to fear a lot of times. I think part of it is fear of the unknown, things that you want to have happen to move forward, but also fear of losing things that you do have, and it's kind of that bridge. And there's nothing good, I guess, about just worrying about that unknown, right? So you need to have a sense of hope at all given times that no matter what happens, things will work out okay. They may not be easy, but they'll turn out okay. And there's Viktor Frankl's Man's Search of Meaning, and those who were able to make it through never lost their faith, their hope, their vision of who they were, of what couldn't be taken away from them. And those who fell apart and eventually gave up were always gone. And so that's at the far extreme end, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But the same principles are applicable to ourselves in every day, right? Where we need to constantly have a sense of our true self, what we value, what is truly important. And it's not the external things. We focused a lot on houses or cars or clothes or different things of status and trips. But the things that are truly, matter are, of course, like we talked about, our health is an extremely important thing. Our families, I would say, our work to some degree, but in the sense of like like a vocation, what our calling is, what is truly important to us, not just what we're collecting a paycheck on, but the effort that we expend that is truly meaningful to us. And then, of course, our communities, the people around us that are just outside of our immediate family. And the rest of it can probably just all be taken away and fall away, and you'll still be okay, right?
Along with this has been a conscious effort to not care so much about the future. And I know that's really hard. You're like, what do you mean don't care about the future? Don't. It's not about not planning for the future. That's not what I'm saying. But I learned what that phrase means about living in the present, not worrying about the future, ignoring the past, that sort of thing. It's not that you don't stress. It's not that you don't prepare yourself for the future, put money in a savings account, whatever the situation is. The way I interpret the whole living in the moment, not thinking about the future too much, is that you have to be able to find a way to trust your future self, that you're going to make the right decision, that you're going to get it done. Because worrying about it today, another quote, sorry, I'm full of them today, is he who worries beforehand worries needlessly, or worries twice, essentially, because you're going to worry now and you're also going to worry when the events in your right there in front of your face. But if you can ignore the past, it happened. You can't change it. It sucks. You probably embarrassed yourself multiple times in your life, but it's done. There's no way to go back. And the future isn't here. You have no idea what it holds. But you also have to be able to trust yourself that, hey, I'm probably capable of handling it. And future Wyatt or future Tanner will rise to the occasion and get the work done, right? And that's been a calming presence in my mind lately.
That's right in line with what I've kind of been talking about for the last few weeks when it comes to my art or writing or different things like that. If I leave it in my head and then just project what I believe it's going to be, it grows to be so big that I can never actually get it out. And if all I do is actually just take action and start creating, whether that's I've been painting a lot more lately, and when I just sit down and start painting and creating something, and I don't actually have that finished result, but I trust the process, like you're talking about here, the work, it's such a pleasant experience. But when I start focusing on the end result and the unknown, and then I'm not actually taking action on the steps, but I'm just thinking about the steps, that's when the anxiety builds and the frustration. And then, and again, to hit it on imposter syndrome, I have a goal right now of creating one new painting a week, and it doesn't have to be anything spectacular or amazing. It's just I want to create one piece from start to finish each week, just to give myself a deadline. And all of a sudden, on like the second day, like just such a wave of imposter syndrome came. And it is so, and nothing really changed outside of I had stopped the first day at a good point. I started on the second day, and then I started to get a glimpse of what that final result was, but I started feeling really inadequate because stopped thinking about the process, and I started thinking about that final piece. And then I was like, well, then I need to add in this and I need to do this, and I wasn't sure on it. And then all my progress that I made from those 2 days, I think, has just stalled significantly. And I've painted a couple more days, but it hasn't been the same good experience that I had the first one. It's been a little bit more anxiety ridden.
Mm-hmm.
And again, mindset is such a huge thing going into it. Am I going into this just to have fun and is it relaxing, and then I can create something exciting? Do I feel fortunate to be in the position to have the tools, resources, and capabilities to do the thing, to create these? Or am I holding myself to some unreasonable standard and some bad expectations and just expecting this to all fall apart? And just to go into a little bit tale of like how far my brain goes, I'm imagining like negative internet comments on like all the stuff once I post this, and all of this is just this fictitious anxiety that hits in my mind when a piece that no one has really seen outside of the screenshots I've shared with my wife on this. And I don't have to show it. That's the funny thing, like I don't have to show anybody any of this work. I have no obligation to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, I have put this pressure and expectation on myself that I can never live up to. And then that just keeps me pushed down off of it. And then it's such a glaring example for me. But thinking about it, I tend to do that on many different things in my life with how I've always, it's not that I'm a perfectionist per se, because I think perfectionism, just being a perfectionist in general, is you can never produce the work because it's never good enough. I do create work, and I just hold myself to extremely high standard. And I think there's a difference to that. It's not that I won't complete the work, but when all the work I do, I will always compare myself to the people who are at the very top of the accolades. And perhaps it's not needing to measure myself externally on those tasks, but just again going back to the process of what I can do and growing within that, and maybe not even worrying about measuring myself across, but just following those actions. I don't know.
Yeah. It's this is a lofty thing for someone who produces a video podcast, but another thing that I've really tried to focus on is, I think I've talked about it before. My mid-30s have been the greatest time of my life. I am in my don't give an F like phase of my life. Look at me, I have a mustache. It's stupid, but what I told myself is that no one's judging me, and whether it's neighbors I have or coworkers or people on the internet who watch this podcast, no one's judging me. Like, yeah, they may look at me like, it's a dumb mustache, but like that doesn't impact me. And then what I realized is, what this whole time I've been nervous or anxious about what other people think of me my whole life. It I I kind of flipped it on this, flipped the script on it. It's not about me um, being anxious and thinking, oh God, they're probably talking about me. But I looked at it in the perspective of how insulting is it of me to them to assume that they don't have their own problems, to assume that they don't have their own imposter syndrome and their own stress at work and their own valley of despair. How insulting is it of me to assume that people have nothing better to do in their lives but look at Wyatt and say, oh, what a dumb mustache, or, oh, you're really dropping the ball. No one does that. Everyone in the world leads these entire robust lives and has their own stresses. And because if you really think about it, how much time do you spend sitting there in your chair at home late at night thinking, oh, that one guy I met 3 weeks ago, what a real doofus. He sucked at this. No one does that. And when I started to look at my anxiety about other people and their opinions from the perspective of me being insulting to them, oh man, that just flipped the script, and it really changed my personality on it.
Yeah.
But
So I guess, go ahead.
I was going to say, but as for you, Tanner, I've known you many years. You have always held yourself to an extremely high standard. You tried to back off of the term perfectionist, but Tanner, come on. No, Tanner, you are one of those individuals who I've always admired for the sense that you get shit done. I'm trying to limit my curses on this podcast to one an episode.
We're PG-13. We get
Yes.
our one.
Yes. But I've always admired your ability to do things that other people can't or won't because they're scared. And it's kind of refreshing. I hope that's not insulting to you to hear that you're doing these amazing things, Tanner. Your art's phenomenal. Your podcast is phenomenal, if I do say so myself. All of these things you do to an extremely high degree, and I've always been really impressed with it. But to hear that you're dealing with imposter syndrome, it humanizes you a little bit. So this is not a talk to give you advice. I just want to say I appreciate you for sharing that, because it's, you see successful people out there, and sometimes you just think they got it all, or they're just they've got that spark. But everyone deals with those issues, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to just kind of wrap this part up, since we're trying to be quicker on these episodes here, when you go negative, ultimately all that does is just push you further and further towards inaction rather than action. And that's what I've seen personally. What starts maybe as just like a little tinge towards you're unhappy with the way things are going, then it can build up to being more resentful, which is by far one of the worst things you can do, because then you start to lose hope, and then you just ultimately just kind of give up and do nothing. And the best thing you can do is just keep moving, keep doing actions, keep doing the work, keep moving forward, whatever those pieces are, because that's what ultimately is going to get you through in life, because that's going to keep you present. It's going to keep you in the moment, and you're not going to just constantly be focusing on all the things that you don't have. And there's a quote here I love, and it says, "You're suffering, at least in part, because you're not everything you could be." And so when you're not actually doing things and creating things and bringing your thoughts into the world, you're holding yourself back, and that's just torturing you. That's causing you suffering, and it's just spiraling. And it's the one thing I really have to kind of keep in perspective and do. And that's where those gratitude journals really help, because having that positive mindset creates that momentum, and that leads, we already talked about physical health, stress management. You get better relationships, whether that be personal or you meet new people because you're doing things for them, and that just causes spirals. So you get better success, and then you get more validation, which gives you better self-esteem. And then it just leads you to all these places that you thought you would have never got. And it's really, thank you for saying all those great things about me, because when you're living the day-to-day minutia of it, it doesn't feel so grand or exciting, and it doesn't feel so special. But it's good to keep the perspective of others. And I think that's why it's important to actually hold deep conversations with others on these subjects, because it gives you good perspective on it.
Yeah. The phrase "stop and smell the roses" has nothing to do with flowers. It's about stopping and appreciating the beauty that is in your life right now. And then you can go back to the grind and all the stress, but you have that one moment of peace. So, Tanner, what I would like to do is I'm going to do it myself. I'd like to invite you just to sign off on here. Let's list 3 things we're grateful for. How about that? I'll start first to make it less awkward for you. So, it sounds like a cop out, but I'm thankful for my family. I am a father of 4 daughters. I have a wonderful wife I've been together with 15 years. I love my family, and I consider myself the definition of a family man, right? Second is I'm very thankful for my career. It's not my job, it's not my salary, it's my career. I've put a lot of effort into it, and I've been one of those people who is pretty quick to drop things that don't pay off real quick, but my career is one thing I've stuck with, and it has paid off over time, and I'm very thankful for myself that I did that. And then third, I'm really thankful for podcasting. Not to be cliche or lame, but Tanner, we've had this conversation. I've never been an artistic person, but I fell into podcasting with you, and I fell in love with podcasting. It feels like I finally found my way to be creative and put something out into the world. And that has been an experience I have been searching for a really long time. So that was cheesy, but 3 things, Tanner.
Family for sure. Coming from a life where I've had not stable relationships and not the best of terms and lots of turmoil, having someone to reliably count on, having a kiddo for the first time and watching them grow, and having just a strong support network around me with family is extremely, I thank the world every day for that. A strong community, really strong, good network of friends and people around me that I can lean on and support on and count on. And if anything ever happened, I knew it would be there for me. For my outlier one, I think living in the time that we are right now. I think that we focus a lot on like what maybe life would have been better in the past. We actually just last night were watching 80s and 90s commercials on YouTube just for nostalgia kicks and different things. But it got me thinking, I don't think I'd ever want to be living in a time other than right now because of what options I do have, everything I know and I can affect. And I don't think moving forward or back would give me any advantage. It would probably only give me disadvantages. So I'm very grateful to be here at this time.
Great answer. Wow. Well done. Well, thank you. This has been a fun but vulnerable episode. And sometimes that's what makes these podcasts special. Is sometimes it's not just about having a phony radio personality. So great episode. Thank you so much, everyone who's made it this long. I hope you appreciate the new format. We're keeping it shorter. I'm sure we've a lot of feedback about it so far. It's been great. Please, just like always, like, share, subscribe, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or your podcast platform of choice. We greatly appreciate it, and your support means the world.
All right. Well, we'll see you all next week. Bye.
Bye.